All right, welcome back to the pod, Reider's Block Episode 3, hosted by yours truly, Sean Reider of the Albuquerque Journal staff writer, and UNM football beat writer. By the time this podcast is recorded and released, we're going to be only a couple days away from UNM's spring game on Saturday, April 20th. It's at 1 p.m. at University Stadium. It is the only practice, or as kind of promised, a game that is open to the public this spring. So just want to go over a couple things that I'm going to be looking at, what maybe you would like to be looking for, and just kind of how it's going to go over. Wanted to start on the first point. Kind of go over this with every program and every spring game they do. How much of an actual spring game will it be? Last year, under former head coach Danny Gonzalez, it was like a Monday night spring showcase. So they did do a decent amount of 11-on-11. They did some drills to kind of start, but they did go like 1s-on-1s, 2s-on-2s, 3s-on-3s for a bit and kind of shuffled the lineups and all that. I actually didn't mind the Monday night thing. It was kind of a little bit easier to write off of than as opposed to if it was on a Saturday. And I thought it was a little bit. I wrote at the time that I liked the move to put it on a Monday. It was a little subdued in the sense that there was, maybe 300 or 400 people there. It was kind of a chilly night, but otherwise nice night for football. This is a different setup. It's going to be on a Saturday like most spring games usually are. And I just, I'm curious about how much of an actual spring game it'll be. What head coach Bronco Mendenhall has indicated is that, how much of a live scrimmage it's going to be is going to be really dependent on how many guys are healthy and how deep they can kind of go. At practice right now this week, there's really no guys walking around with casts or boots on or whatever to indicate, significant injuries and the like. But there are a pretty good amount of, guys in turquoise jerseys. That means that they're non-contact or limited via some injury or some ailment kind of going on, particularly at the tight end spot this week as well. Pierre Comedy Jr., he's a transfer that's been getting a pretty good amount of time at cornerback per Bronco Mendenhall. He's injured as well. There's some guys kind of coming off the that turquoise jersey, kind of IL of sorts or whatever. But I'm just mainly curious. I mean, how deep are they right now to actually go kind of 1s-on-1s, 2s-on-2s, 3s-on-3s in the way that you would traditionally expect, and how much of it is that night, how much of that afternoon is kind of dedicated to that in terms of the spring game. I think that'll be a pretty good indicator of just how the roster is with the transfer portal by that point kind of already open. And, you're probably going to see some positions where it's like, okay, well, probably going to be some additions there. Second point I'm kind of looking at, to this point, we've had some media open periods to watch. And typically you see a lot of special teams work, kickoff, kick return, punt team and all that. And then some routes on air from the defense and defensive alignment drills mainly. To this point, I've only seen one kind of 11-on-11, kind of somewhat live, not totally, knock down, drag down, tackle stuff, but one live 11-on-11 period. I'm really just mainly curious, this is my kind of big point, what this defense looks like in a live setting, if they do indeed go live for the spring game, which is what we're kind of expecting. It wasn't a question last year of what the defense would actually look like. You knew it was going to be the 3-3-5 that, Rocky Long used to such great success here in the past, and then Danny Gonzalez implemented it. That's his preferred base scheme. This year, it's a bit of a question about, the what and the who. To this point, I'm expecting a 3-4 base. But, Bronco Mendenhall has repeated it multiple times. They wanted to use schemes that can't be named. They think they like that element in terms of offense and defense, things that, you can't name, because if you can't name it, it's a lot harder to fight it. To this point, I'm seeing a 3-4 in the limited defensive alignment drills that we've been seeing at practice and the limited 11-on-11 periods we've seen. Everything points to being a 3-4, but they like flexibility. I want to see how flexible the defense can actually be in terms of different packages and the like, and then what personnel supports that flexibility in particular. Who are the guys that can stay on the field from one kind of package change to the next? I'm also curious about the personnel. As I mentioned, Pierre Comedy Jr. is a guy that apparently has been seeing some good time at cornerback. He has a turquoise jersey right now. Who knows how good he'll be to go for the spring game. I'm curious about the linebackers. I've touched on this podcast. I've written about it to a pretty good extent to this point through spring practice. Really the two guys are Dimitri Johnson, Mahalo Santoreneos. Who else is kind of stepping up, and who else is going to be able to make an impact at that position? Defensive line is something I've also written about as well. There's a lot of guys back from last year, but it's going to be a little bit different in terms of responsibilities and than it was last year, I should say. And, there's some seasoned guys there too, but it's also, it was a unit that by and large did struggle throughout the most of last season. They did bring in some bodies this year, and I think they're going to be bringing in more guys to the transfer portal as well. One of the, you could say it's maybe the first team pairing during the defensive line alignment, during the defensive alignment drills I've seen Weber State transfer Okiki Olorunfunmi, one of the defensive end spots, Kyler Drake, and then Tyler Keeney is kind of the main defensive line three front. I'm curious to see just how much that kind of holds over during the spring game as well, and what, how they use these guys, and what personnel, again, kind of like the linebackers, makes a difference at that spot, because there's some good guys in position last year, but just not enough of a defensive difference made in games, and that was kind of a pivotal thing for UNM last season. Third point, something else I'm looking at, it feels like to this point, through a lot of the stuff we've seen at practice in terms of the routes on air work, you've kind of become, at least from what I've seen, kind of become comfortable and familiar with the, the kind of balanced scheme that offensive coordinator Jason Beck ran at Syracuse, and it's kind of picked up from a longtime offensive coordinator under Bronco Mendenhall, Robert and I. Just how much has the offense kind of come together, and how much are they going to be able to do, and with what personnel? It's a similar point to the defense, but I mean, how much has been installed, and, how much, and again, who the difference makers are going to be. After last Saturday's scrimmage, Bronco indicated that he was pleased with the offensive front. He's pleased with the running backs in particular. And he mentioned that there's a couple throws that Devin, probably starting quarterback right now at the very least, Devin Dampier would probably like back. But just seeing how that unit in particular has kind of come together to this point, and what they're all comfortable doing, particularly Devin, and not to make every single comparison to last year, because at this point it's a very different team and it's a very different program than it was. But, former offensive coordinator Bryant Vincent, who's here just for last year, he made the point about former starting quarterback Dylan Hopkins that, he should have been comfortable with that spring game last year, because he'd been running that offense for 4 or 5 years when BV was at UAB. How comfortable is kind of Devin in this new offense, and how are you going to see him kind of make a difference with the package, the athletic package he really brings to the field in terms of being a really dynamic thrower and a really dynamic runner? I'm also looking at, who's going to be able to make a difference in the wide receiver group. Bronco Mendenhall kind of said it yesterday when we were talking to him. Caleb Medford is one of the guys after the season he had last year, coming in from TCU, that is kind of penciled in to be a difference maker. Want to see how much he's kind of keeping that up in this live environment, but also a couple transfers like, Isaiah Jones and Sean Miller, and then some other returners like Luke Weissong. He's finally healthy after, I forget the exact injury he battled last year. I think he suffered in the Tennessee Tech game. I want to say it was a shoulder injury, but don't quote me on that at the moment. He's been making an impact so far from everything we've heard and from what we've seen so far, but also his younger brother, Evan Weissong, has also been getting some time, and that was something that really wasn't going on last year. I'm curious to see how he's kind of fitting in with this offense, and just kind of the diversity of plays that you end up seeing. From what we've seen in practice, they've done different things. They've split out, DC Tabscott. He was a backup quarterback right now. They've kind of split him out wide and let running back Eli Sanders, an Iowa State transfer, step in at the Wildcat and do a little bit of work there. It's something that we saw a lot through the first 2 weeks. I didn't see it at all this week, and we're recording this right now at the tail end of the third week of spring practice. If we see it during the spring game, I'm curious just to see what it looks like in a live environment with an actual defense kind of countering it. My fourth and final point, and this is not to criticize anything in terms of attendance or fan interest. It is just kind of out of raw curiosity. How many, fans and people do end up showing up? I accidentally started a social media firestorm during the Utah State game last year, the season finale. I posted a video, I should say, actually, of the stands, and that got a very dramatic social media reaction. I just did it to put it out there. I'm just mainly curious to see how many people show up, because it seems like there is, I don't want to say a renewed interest in the program to this point, but definitely, a higher level than I think what I was seeing last year. And I was still new to the beat at that point, still getting my bearings very much underneath me. You'd probably say the same thing about me these days as well. But I don't know. It seems like people are very excited for this new era under Bronco. They're excited for this team. They're excited for the transfers they've got coming in, the transfers that are here right now. But also, some of the returners, guys like Devin. I mean, very aesthetically pleasing football player to watch, very fun player. Guys like Caleb Medford, Andrew Henry, Javen Jacobs, who's a running back, transfer from Arizona State. And then, like I mentioned, Sanders. But, just want to see how much that interest plays out on a tangible level in terms of, people packing the stands or coming out and tailgating and the like, and just how that works. That being said, if it's not a great showing, I will say that spring ball attendance is not the best metric. You see a lot of P5 or P4, I should say, programs at this point that, usually don't get good spring ball attendance, spring game attendance, and that's not an indictment on anything. It's just kind of the way it is. I believe the weather that I've seen for next Saturday's spring game is going to be 78 and sunny, so weather shouldn't be an issue, but it's also spring in New Mexico. Seems like anything can kind of change at any given moment. But yeah, just curious about that. And I think the interest is important in a lot of ways, because Bronco Mendenhall has talked about how important it is to kind of sell fans on the vision in terms of getting people back to games consistently and getting people to support the program consistently. And I think this is kind of the first, in terms of, the actual on-field product, the first chance that they can really market that, and how people show up and how they build on it is something I'm very, very interested in seeing. With that being said, those are the things that I'm interested in seeing, but I'm always interested in hearing what the fans are interested in seeing and what they want to learn more about. I know fans don't have any access right now to the practices that are made available to the media. So if you have any questions, feel free to email sreider at ABQ Journal, or just email sports at ABQ Journal. And I'll respond the best I can and try and get answers the best I can. With that being said, this is Riders Block Episode 3. Always a pleasure to hop in here and get it going. You can listen to this podcast, prior editions of the podcast, and episodes of Talking Grammar, Prep Central, Fast Break, and the Leading Ladies of Rio Rancho on the Albuquerque Journal Podcast Network. That's available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, YouTube. Pretty much anywhere and everywhere that you get podcasts, you can find the Albuquerque Journal Podcast Network. That being said, I'm Sean Reider, and appreciate you listening.